And here we go. Hi, I'm Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and whatever other earthly planet or earthly platform we can put this on. It's going to be a fun live chat today. Hopefully you all chime in and join in. We're going to talk about the coaching search, trade targets, what the Penguins are actually going to do this offseason. I think Kyle Dubas has been fairly transparent with that. And, whatever else you want to get into. I can tell the Minnesota people found my article about Marco Rossi. Oh, you can't possibly. And here come the fanboys, and I'm just going to smile and keep going, right? How do I look? Yeah, about as good as this old package can. So let's, I think we're going to start with the coaching search. Now, for the subscriber-only chat on Monday, I went through my short list and I really kind of dug into who I didn't think would be a good fit. Actually, David Carl was on my list. Shortly thereafter, he was off the list entirely as he re-upped at the University of Denver. A little bit surprising to me for a guy to have his moment and decline it. That was okay. Either he is just really in love with what he does, exactly where he does it, doesn't want the headaches, the hassle, or the big money of the NHL. Okay. I guess it's that sort of college football coach that those guys just entrench, or at least they used to anyway, entrench in a spot, build up the program, and then just oversee it until the end of time. Whereas I guess now they're all just jumping and jumping up and jumping up until they get that big job that somebody else built for them. Anywho, we'll talk about the coaching search, the trade targets. I thought there was I always keep going back to Buffalo on the trade targets. And I can't escape the fact that, yes, the Penguins scouted Buffalo. Yes, the Penguins scouted Buffalo pretty heavily this season and were really, reported by others to be looking closely at what the Sabres have. And I don't think the Sabres situation lends itself to keeping everything. They're going to have a glut, kind of an overflowing sort of thing of centers. So, and I think the Penguins desperately want centers and defensemen. So we're going to talk about Buffalo as well. And, of course, whatever else you want to chime in on. Do me a favor, like, subscribe, and get those comments rolling, because I am going to get into the head coaching search. I'm going to start with our prime. I think we talked about this maybe last week. The 5 preliminary favorites included 3 new names. DJ, in fact, no, actually, we didn't do this last week because Francis Anzalone and I were just kind of bandying names about last week. Francis gave us a couple of really good names. Coach Francis, just he knows his stuff so cut and dry. Like there's no questioning him when he tells you something. I'm still DJ Smith. That's who's pictured right there. Former Ottawa Senators coach. He's still, if I had to pick 3 to 5 names, he'd be in my 3. Certainly in my 5. Because Ottawa thought so highly of him. And I don't just mean the general manager, Pierre Dorian, and such. I mean the players, like Brady Tkachuk thanked him on the way out the door for making him a better man and a better player. All of those things, to me, just scream kind of the right fit for where the Penguins are. I suppose the question is, would he want to take on another rebuild? He kind of got snookered in Ottawa where they didn't rebuild fast enough, and there he went. He lasted 3+ years, 4+ years. I think here's a name right here. And this was the one that Francis tossed at us, was Drew Bannister. Tossed us. I think my buddy Josh Yohe mentioned him late last week as well. So now there's kind of two of us on the Drew Bannister bandwagon. Here's a guy who's won in the AHL, won in juniors. He comes from the Sioux Greyhounds, although I guess I call them the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds there. That's overly proper. They're just the Sioux Greyhounds. He got pushed out in St. Louis begrudgingly, only because Jim Montgomery became available and Doug Armstrong, the GM / president of hockey ops there in St. Louis, really liked Montgomery and couldn't pass up the opportunity to hire him. So after less than a year, really, or about one full year, they made the switch. Bannister had success in St. Louis. He pulled the team together after Craig Berube had sort of lost them. They got it, they had a great run there. He probably would have pulled them together again, because you can see here Bannister was 30, 19, and 5 after he took over. But then they had kind of an under 500 start to this season, and away he went. I am not necessarily a big fan of Jay Woodcroft, although I could see it happening. I know you saw the name on there. Woodcroft is one of those I'm still a little bit tepid on, and I know everyone's like, "Yeah, I would, toss him on the pile." I don't think my Pittsburgh colleagues who have advocated for him saw what I saw. And the reason for that was I covered the 2023 Round 2 series between Vegas and Edmonton. Woodcroft got outcoached pretty badly, actually, by Bruce Cassidy. And even some of the hockey noobs in Vegas began to realize, like, wow, their adjustments they have one adjustment: panic, throw McDavid and Draisaitl together, and that's it. That was kind of the extent of Edmonton's adjustments in that series, and that's why it ended in 6. Edmonton had that ridiculous power play, you'll recall, 2 years ago. They were clicking in the playoffs at over 50%. It was a nightmare to try to stop. And, that's to his credit. But once Vegas sort of solved that, and then, Jack Eichel could skate with McDavid, Vegas just, took them to the woodshed, so to speak. So I wasn't a big fan of Woodcroft. But there's two names I put very close to the top of the list. Let me see here. And then I've got a couple of more names I'm going to toss out at you. Let me share the screen here so you're not looking at my ugly mug. Wait, here's 5 under-the-radar names. The 3 guys pictured here. I don't think the middle guy, Elaine Nasreddine, is under the radar anymore. When I first wrote that last week, or was it? Yeah, was it Sunday? I wrote this 4 days ago, May 3rd. I don't even know what day that was. Yeah, I think that was Sunday. No one had really mentioned Nasreddine as a contestant in the Penguins sweepstakes. Now I'm hearing his name more and more. The reason for that was you probably saw Game 7, Colorado-Dallas. That was Nasreddine with the whiteboard over the wall in the final minutes, diagramming and breaking things down for his team, barking, "You do this, you do that." Orchestrated it perfectly. That's the kind of guy that teams are going to look at. He does have a bit of head coaching experience in the NHL even. He was the interim for more than half a season with New Jersey when they fired John Hines. So he's not an entire neophyte. He's coached under some pretty good coaches, Hines, and now 3 years under Pete DeBoer. That's a pretty good track record. So those would be my three, my very top three. The guy on the left here is Nate Lehman of Providence. I don't know enough about Nate to say he should be a stone cold candidate for the job. I've been told he's been picky when the NHL teams call. He's built Providence from kind of nothing of a hockey program in the shadow of the Beanpot Blue Bloods to a very tough team every single year. And that's kind of what his MO is. He produces players like Nola Chari, Brandon Duhaime. He produces guys who have shoulders and know how to use them. Now, without being in the interview room, I don't know if his X's and O's are quite up to snuff with the NHL. I think that's always a worry with college coaches. We've seen a lot of guys break from the college rank to the pros, and they very often don't have success in their first stop. But if they were good enough, if they comported themselves well enough, they often get a second shot. Dave Hackstall springs to mind. Here was a guy so highly thought of out of the University of North Dakota, and the Flyers just had some glaring X's and O's holes that teams were able to exploit. Went to Seattle and had a good year and a half. I don't know. He's out. He's been out, and I don't think Dave Hackstall will get back in because he never really closed some of those holes, namely penalty killing. Never had a good penalty kill. Never, ever when he was in the NHL. Not the Flyers were terrible killing penalties, awful, and Seattle struggled with it as well. Let's get to some questions now that I've laid out sort of my favorites. Those are my four, really. Bannister and Nasreddine and DJ Smith. Nate Lehman's a long shot at best. In fact, he's probably not even on, wouldn't even probably make Kyle Dubas' top 10 list, but I'm just telling you he would make mine. Let's go to Flux. Thoughts on targeting Mate Blumel from the Texas Stars as a UFA? Listen, you're digging deep. I'm not paying that close of attention to the AHL right now. Yes, Dallas has in fact blocked. I mean, they've essentially blocked Maverick Bourque. So you guys throw these kind of obscure names at me. Listen, I spend 82 games with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I go cover Wilkes-Barre. Trust me, in my night off, I'm not tuning into the Texas Stars. Good Lord. Andrew Gresko, will the Penguins make a big splash during free agency, i.e. Mitch Marner, Brock Besser, etc.? Or do I think they will make less aggressive moves like the past offseason? Andrew, great question. I know the answer to this question. I don't think I know what they are going to do. They are not going to make a big splash. Kyle Dubas left very little wiggle room. He does not want to give a long-term contract to a 28-year-old who will be 33, 34 years old when the Penguins really return to contender status. Those were his words, not mine. Now, plug in those facts that I just spoke to several recent reports, news stories, opinions about the split between Kyle Dubas and Mike Sullivan. Dubas is looking at 5 years before the Penguins are consistent Stanley Cup contenders once again. That's by his own words. Indirectly, mind you, but he does not want to give, he doesn't want big long-term contracts to free agents this year. What he's looking to do is trade for restricted free agents. Again, his own words. He's not going to go big game hunting on the RFA market either, because big game hunting for RFAs will cost you necessarily not on, there's no wiggle room, a first and a third round pick, or even more, like 3 first rounders. The Penguins are not going to do that. They're not going to give up a 2026, their 2026 first round pick for any of the RFAs. The only one who might be worth that kind of haul would be Luke Hughes in New Jersey. But would Hughes leave New Jersey in the comfort of his brother? Oh, I have to play with my brother. I don't get that stuff, but that's just me. So that ain't happening. That's what we know, Andrew. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, that's what we know. Here's a little tidbit for you. When you're watching a Kyle Dubas press conference, the tell that I've been able to pick up on so far, when Dubas tells you straight, he'll deliver a direct sentence, looking straight at you, looking straight ahead, or right down the barrel. When he does that and says something cleanly or clearly, believe it. When he starts tossing the word salads with tangents here, kind of a misdirect here, and you kind of put this whole spider web together to try to figure out what he was really saying, when he does that, that's when he's trying not to tell you what he really wants to do, what he really feels, when he's trying to say the right thing, even though he wants to change his mind or wants to do something different. That's what I've learned. Prime example, when he sort of talked in circles around the Mike Sullivan question at his year-end press conference. Remember? Because you and I talked about this. Dubas' first couple of sentences, when asked about Mike Sullivan, I leaned forward like, oh, he's going to say it. He's going to say that to be determined. And then he sort of leaned back into, kind of acquiescing to keeping Mike Sullivan. It was far from a guarantee, but given everything we knew, I didn't think it would happen because of the way he's like, with him as the coach. So it turns out, I think that was the final proof I needed to tell you the tell that when you see the word salad, those are the issues that you should pick up on. That regular dude. All right. Hey, thanks, everyone. Do me a favor. Share this around, too, on the social media while I yabber and stammer and talk. I like the Kulik idea from your article this morning. I've been a Ryan McLeod truther for years. Elite speed, terrific on the PK. Yeah, given the proper chance, not in the shadow or dealing with whatever that is in Edmonton, that just some players have not found their rhythm up there. McLeod would be my first choice. I don't think, because Kulik, I'm not sure which, is only 21. Buffalo's going to keep that around. I think the media speculation in Toronto was J.J. Peterka. I think he's the one they have circled as the guy that Kevin Adams will part with. But McLeod, maybe that was the holdup. Maybe the Penguins didn't want Peterka and they wanted McLeod. There can be only one. Steve Nash, does the fact that Alain Nasreddine played with the core three help, hurt, or not matter at all with his candidacy? If he got it, would it impact his locker room influence at all? I've thought about that a little bit, but it's not like he played for years with those guys. And it's not like he went through the Stanley Cup wars with those guys. They don't quite have that walk together forever bond with him. He was more down in the minors. He spent most of his Penguins organizational career downstairs. I do think it would probably help ease the transition a bit. Like, they know what they're getting. They're going to remember his commanding presence, a guy with, scars on the bridge of his nose every day of his playing career. They're going to remember those things, and they're going to have a certain level of respect, knowing that he knows, A, how good they are, B, how hard they work, and C, they're going to know how intense and commanding he is. And so there's going to maybe be less of a feeling out process in that regard, personally. And then, you can get to the professional feeling out a little bit faster. What kind of coach has he become? What kind of coach does he want to be? Then you can get into those sorts of things. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know that it will help or hurt. I just think it would probably expedite things from those standpoints. I really, the longer Dallas plays and the better they play, Nasreddine very well might have his choice of jobs. Boston might come calling. Hey, Ron Francis is never adverse to a former Penguin kind of guy, right? Francis would have enough. Francis is, I guess, moved up in the world. Jason Botterill. Oh yeah, Botterill and Nasreddine should have some pretty close connection, right? Botterill would have had plenty of time with the Wilkes-Barre Penguins when Nasreddine was there, and they were both sort of there at the same time. So maybe Seattle would be a favorite to get him. Certainly, they would call when appropriate. I didn't even think of the Botterill, who's the new GM in Seattle. Didn't even think of that connection until just this moment. Chicken a la King. By the way, what is chicken a la King? I haven't seen that on a menu in 20 years, but I'd like to get Mitch Love just to put the screws to Washington. Absolutely, chicken a la King. He was on that. Did I forget to mention him? Yes, I did. Good catch, good call. Absolutely. I'll go back to the favorites. Yep, there's Mitch Love, 40 years old. Has spent 2 years at each level that he's coached. 2 years head coach in junior. Quickly rocketed out of that job into the AHL in the Calgary Flames system. Spent, the first year their AHL affiliate was in Stockton. They did really well. He wins Coach of the Year. They moved their AHL affiliate actually to Calgary. He goes with them, wins Coach of the Year again. Given the Capitals, I don't want to call it a resurgence, but yeah, I mean, look, they made the playoffs last year, albeit by the skin of their teeth with a down year. But this year, they've looked unstoppable. I mean, yeah, they lost last night, but they've looked much better than anybody anticipated. That guy has to get some credit. You'll recall that Francis Anzalone, I thought, had a really great point when he said, let's start with Spencer Carberry and work backwards. Kyle Dubas will be looking for his Spencer Carberry. I'm going to say Carberry. I'm going to go full on Yinzer. Carberry. I think Mitch Love could be that guy. Yeah, so that would round out my 5. I think I did say my 5, then I only gave you 4 names, didn't I? I get sidetracked. I start reading your comments. I start looking at myself like, I can't see. These glasses don't have a very good intermediate. These are progressives. So I have to keep going like this to see myself, to see your questions. I probably should change glasses, not wear these for the live chats anymore. I forgot all about that. Sonny, with the mix of veterans to rookies that the Penguins currently have, Which other NHL team's style of play should they emulate for success under a new coach? Sonny, I'm not sure. In fact, I'm not sure how you're connecting those two things. That's, those two don't go together. It doesn't matter if you have a team of 20 rookies or 20 veterans. That's not going to affect your style of play. What should affect your style of play is, in fact, the players. What kind of talent you have on the roster. To that end, Sonny, I'm going to kind of answer maybe the bigger question, or the better question, in terms of what the Penguins have. How will a new coach sort of instill a style of play? I think the one thing that we probably should take off the table, which is still in the Penguins' DNA to their detriment, is wanting to play on the rush. They're not a good enough skating team in relation to the rest of their opponents to play on the rush. Let's say 16, 18, 19, they were generally a lot quicker than their opponents. 17 was a different matter. 17, their legs were heavy. They were tired. They were just grizzled veterans gutting it out day in and day out. How that team won the Stanley Cup is just pure force of will. Having said that now, they were a good rush team through large parts of their history. Take it off the table now. I do not think they could play on the rush. I don't think they certainly don't defend well enough. Their defensemen are actually built for the rush game, but they're all built for kind of the rush game. And they don't have anyone really to defend hard in the zone. Make that stop on the mid-wall. You heard Mike Sullivan say this probably a couple dozen times. We have to stop the play. Well, the Penguins' defense doesn't stop the play on the mid-wall. They don't blunt the puck, and they don't get that puck and quick up to spring the rush. They just don't have that. They have a lot of guys who can skate with the rush, but not launch it so well. And not a lot of guys who can defend a 3-on-2 very well, or even a 3-on-3 and get it going back the other way. They just don't have those guys anymore. It's kind of I've said it before, it's a poorly constructed blue line. I think what the Penguins have with Koivunen, with McGroarty, with Crosby, with Rust, even Raquel, put a pin in Raquel. Those guys really play a hard game in the offensive zone. I mean, go ahead. Try to take the puck from any of those guys. You will have to fight tooth and nail. And then, if you do happen to win the puck from them, they are on you to get it back. All of them. I think, that gritty down low game, call it a dump and chase, kind of putting the puck into open space and, establishing a forecheck or establishing layers through the neutral zone so that when you chip it in, now you're waiting for that turnover. I think that's where the Penguins will be headed. That's my 2 cents. Brandon, would the Rangers be foolish to give us their first season? Okay, I see what you're saying. I got you. Would the Rangers be foolish to give us their first round pick next season after the Islanders just won the draft lottery? Yes. The Rangers, wait. What? Brandon, you're killing me here. I'm just going to answer what the Rangers should do. The Rangers should keep this 12th overall pick. Give the Penguins the unprotected 2026 pick. Here's why. Mike Sullivan. the overwhelming odds are that the Rangers will be much better next season than they were this season. Sure, there's still the chance that things just go to hell. Everything implodes. Sullivan and JT Miller don't get along, and Sullivan and Mika Zibanejad are at odds, and they can't trade anybody, and they're stuck with Chris Kreider, and Keandre Miller succumbs to the chaos, and he goes down the rabbit hole and has another step back sort of season, and Igor Shesterkin gets hurt, and they're rolling with a 40-year-old Jonathan Quick in net. Sure, it could happen. It probably won't. There's nothing in Mike Sullivan's coaching history to suggest that it would happen that way. Sullivan kept Phil Kessel almost in line until the final half season when it just hit the fan. And nobody really wanted Phil Kessel. So, yeah, the Rangers should absolutely keep this 12th overall pick and give the Penguins their 2026 pick. All right, Brandon's going to double dip here. You took a chip, you dipped it. You took a bite, and then you dipped it again. Brandon Rickner, counter question to Dubas making a big splash. Would they potentially be on the other end of a big splash, i.e. Karlsson, Rust, and Raquel? You mean trading them away, Brandon? Yes, very, very possibly. I suppose I don't think trading Erik Karlsson would constitute a big splash, though. I think everybody pretty much knows they would do it, and Karlsson probably wouldn't argue too much. But Rust and Raquel certainly would constitute a big splash. Sir D, sir. Since we're in the offseason and thusly deep in bad hot takes, here's Sir D, sir's bad hot take. Dubas quits to work for the Islanders, and general manager Jim Rutherford and Tocchet come back to Pittsburgh. Oh, you can dream, can't you? Let's go back to Chicken Alley King. Like the Luke Hughes impersonation. I probably shouldn't have done that. I apologize to the Hughes family and Luke Hughes. I just don't get this whole I want to play with my brothers stuff. You're in the NHL. You're men. You're grown freaking men. Set about your own career. Like, you're not 8 on the same T-ball or Little League team. 8 is in between T-ball and Little League. But you know what I'm saying. I don't get that at all. Go on your own. Get your own life. Robert Whitney, what do I think they could get in a trade with the Avalanche for Sid? Robert, go away. Big Joe asks, I still like Nelson. I assume you mean Brock Nelson, not Ricky Nelson. Do you think Sid will have a say in a coach, or that Dubas might take his suggestions, if he has any, to heart, since they will be overseas together for a while? That's a really good question. And here is my interpretation, and it's only my interpretation. Dubas is putting his stamp on the organization. Dubas has a big enough ego that he has to do it his way. This, above all things, these last few months, or the next few months, are going to be Kyle Dubas's. If Sid wanted, let's just say Sid wanted him to really talk to Nasreddine, I think Dubas would do it because it makes sense. If Sid calls up and says, hey, I really liked, I'm trying to think of Sid's, the emergency goalie. I'm drawing a blank. But let's just say, yeah, I want you to bring back Dan Bilesma as coach. Kyle would probably say, Sid, I appreciate the input. That's just not what I'm looking for. Thanks. take it for what you will. Sid isn't going to make demands. To my knowledge, Sid has had in his career a few important conversations with higher ups, but I don't know of any in the last 10 years. Swear. I know when the Penguins were being coached by Mike Johnston, I know that those veterans were absolutely not on board, and I know that there was some conversations with ownership, i.e. Mario, about that. Those, going back a decade, remember those rumors of the big rift between Sid and Mario back in 2015? There was some truth to that. It wasn't really a rift so much it was, as it was an argument. And I know some secondhand things, and I'm afraid to tell you the story because I think some of you might take it as a firsthand report, and I don't want to see this on the blogs. But there were conversations. Sid was reporting to owners that this wasn't going to work any longer, that they had to make a change. And the nature of the change was part of the discussion, when Mike Sullivan was eventually promoted. I do think Sid will be in the loop, though. When they get down to 2 or 3 candidates, I could see Dubas saying, hey, Sid, what do you think of this guy? Hey, Sid, what do you think of that guy? And just sort of taking it. My phone in the other room heard me say Sid and thinks I'm saying her name. But I could see. I could see Sid getting a little bit of input, but certainly not a final say. And if Dubas really liked one of the final 3 candidates and Sid said, you should really look at this other one, Dubas is going to go with the guy he wants. Ryan, do the Pens use... Ryan, you got it backwards here, brother. The free agency season, when you can sign a restricted free agent, begins July 1st. That's after the 2025 draft. So the Penguins will have already spent, in one way, shape, or form, that 11th overall pick. If the Penguins are to sign an RFA this summer, they will be forfeiting, if it was a first round pick worthy RFA, they would be forfeiting their 2026 first round pick. Let me say it clearly for those of you in the back. Absolutely no way in hell will that happen. No. 0% chance. Not 0.001, not 1%. Absolutely no way will they give up their 2026 first round pick on any RFA. Period. Got it? Okay. Good. Ryan comes back. Ryan, you dipped the chip. You took a bite. I'm kidding. Are the Leafs committed to re-signing Matthew Knies? I'd go after him with that pick. I just explained. I think there were some rumors that Kyle Dubas had some interest in Matthew Knies, but Toronto didn't like the structure of the deal. I don't know how true that is. It's what I've heard that chatter in the media. I've not heard that chatter internally. Get that off the screen. Just to be clear, it would be the 2026 draft picks, not the 25 picks. Got that? And 2, they are not giving up a first-round pick on any RFA. 3, hang on, let me hold. 3, Kyle Dubas already downplayed the potential of signing an RFA because he understands that the competition will be fierce for them. Also, most of the teams who have the RFAs that he wants or would want have enough money to sign them. The guy to watch would be Keandre Miller in New York, because New York doesn't have enough money. They're trying desperately to unload Chris Kreider. They're trying to unload Mika Zibanejad, although they want something in return for Zibanejad. as well they should. They want nothing back for Kreider other than to get his $7 million off of the books. So they might find themselves trapped. And Miller is kind of sitting there as a restricted free agent, very much like Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway last summer. But the thing is, once again, now AFP Analytics estimated Miller's a short-term deal for Miller at 4.6. That is just below the line that demarcates second-round pick forfeiture versus first and a third. The NHL has not yet released where that line is for 2025. They'll do so, I think, next month, or maybe later this month. They will put out the RFA compensation tiers. If Miller is out there, let's just say a team like, Dallas is a bad team like Colorado might say, okay, well, actually, I guess Colorado has traded their 26th first-round pick, too. I think they're without a first-round pick until 27. I'm struggling here to find, how about L.A. that expects to have a later 20s draft pick, right? Wants to get a little bit younger, needs some younger defensemen, or at least one younger defenseman. Now, Dubas would probably offer up to about 4.9, right below the line, if he could. But LA might say, okay, this is worth a 25th overall pick and a third rounder. Sure, done. Here's 5.5, K-Andre. Dubas knows that potential and possibility. He doesn't want to get himself into that sort of a situation. So what the Penguins are going to do is try to trade. Try to trade for RFAs. And as such, let's get into the Penguins trade talk. There it is. Dun, dun, dun. Have I explained everything? I feel like I'm explaining a lot today. I'm going into professorial mode rather than radio host mode. Penguins trade talk, new potential target, and a few more center options. Now, that guy you're looking at there is Marco Rossi of the Minnesota Wild. I think he should be near the top of the list for the Penguins. Isaac Howard, but Howard's a winger. Rossi, what separates him is he can play center. He is a center, not can play. He is a center who can play wing. Minnesota has just never been sold on him. I watched some of a podcast with Mike Russo, who covers Minnesota as well as, any reporter in the league covers any team. And he said, look, Rossi did everything they asked of him last summer, came into camp and came into the season being the player they asked him to be. And yet they're still a little bit lukewarm on him because sooner than later they're going to have to pay him the big money. And it just doesn't seem that Bill Guerin wants to do that. Thus, Rossi is more than likely, available. Now, what is a 23-year-old who scored 60 points worth to a team? That is a very good question. Because I'll come back to the potential trade targets. I'll get back into the other people that I was talking about, or wrote about rather. So Rossi is not a big guy, 5'9", $185. I kind of like the sturdy lower base. Hey, Sid, teach this guy what you know. I mean, look, Sidney Crosby in his third year was 5. Sid says he's 5'10". Okay, we'll go with that, right? 5'9", $185. Add a few more pounds, hit the weight room, get some tree trunks on you. And Crosby, that style of game we were talking about earlier. I like it when pieces of the puzzle start fitting together. You have another center who can play that hard game down low with offensive creativity, with some offensive flair below the dots. I think that becomes a very good scenario for the Penguins. The problem is you have to spend something to get him. Minnesota isn't going to dump him. They're going to have suitors for him. Does it cost Rickard Rakell? I could see that. I think Rickard Rakell is worth more than Rossi. So Minnesota probably has, in my mind, Minnesota have to sweeten that deal a little bit. I think Rakell is a 3-asset kind of guy. Some teams disagree. I know that for a fact. Maybe he's a 2-asset guy. Maybe it's Rossi and, a lesser add-on than I would like, but that's where I would be. I would also, because look, Minnesota is entering win now mode. They've got a good core. They're not old. They're not staring at a rebuild in a couple of years. They're ready to win. They're ready to get over that hump, that first round hump. Would Bill Guerin want the Rangers' first round pick for Rossi? That gives him a weapon. At that point, you're not necessarily acquiring the first round pick. You're acquiring what that first round pick can buy for you. And I know Guerin's a creative enough guy that he would know that too. All right, let's get to Robert's back. Since there are rumors that Nathan is going to try and... Yes, well, Robert, listen to me here. Listen closely. There are no rumors that Nathan MacKinnon will try to persuade Crosby to come to Colorado. That was Elliot Friedman kind of jokingly in jest talking about the situation. Okay? He was saying, oh, Nate's going to be burning a hole through him because Nate wants him to go. Yes. That's not a rumor. That's a reporter talking about a scenario. Listen, you don't think that happened last summer when those two were tearing up Halifax at the sports bars and such? You don't think that happened a couple of years ago after, when Sid had to be the drunkest guy at Nate's Stanley Cup party because Nate was the drunkest guy at Sid's Stanley Cup party? You don't think you don't think that conversation has happened a dozen times? And I'm sure Crosby is like, knock it off. If there's ever a possibility that I reconsider, I'll call you. You don't call me. JR. Oh, tell me what chicken a la king is. Okay. A dish consisting of diced chicken and a cream sauce. I recall it being like brown in the 80s. Diced chicken, cream sauce, sherry, mushrooms. Okay, that's why it would be darker. And vegetables, generally served over rice, noodles, or bread. Sounds like a bit of a dark, bitter flavor. I'm out. I like chicken bruschetta and like a good chicken romano, that zesty lemon sort of flavor. Andrew, do you think the Rangers will send the 12th overall pick this year? No, I don't. Okay, back to Flux. By the way, Flux CC, I'm going to give him a little plug here, has his own YouTube channel, has done some like highlight reels of some of the players that the Penguins could take. Flux, post your link if you're still around. How many of the older bottom 6 guys get moved this offseason to make room for the youth? You're talking Hayes, Lizotte, Achari, Heinen. Well, Lizotte's only 26. I don't know if I would call him one of the older bottom 6 guys. They signed Blake Lizotte for 2 years for a reason, but he's certainly not indispensable. Let's just say the Rossi trade. Let's just say Guerin likes Blake Lizotte. Says, okay, I'll give you Rossi and the 2 for Rakell, but I want you to toss in Blake Lizotte. That's the kind of stuff. I liked Blake Lizotte quite a bit this season. he kind of has streaks of offensive competence. The rest of the guys, you're talking Hayes, Achari, Heinen. Yes, I think if Kyle Dubas had his druthers, he would move 1, 2, or all 3 of those guys. I don't think any of them serve a purpose in the rebuild, retool. I think they're bodies. Achari is a warrior whose time is coming sooner than later. There's a lot of miles on that odometer. That guy has spent his career. I mean, he's used it all up. If he were a cat, he'd probably have used 7, if not 8 of those lives already. Again, if a team wants a gritty shot blocking fourth liner, like Toronto needed a couple of years ago, yeah. And if you trade Hayes, I think you free up a spot for Tristan Brose very quickly. Jacob Graham with a 5-year competitive timeline. What part will term come into play with the coaching search? One has to jokingly assume that when the rebuild is done, Dubas will hand the team to Sid as the coach. I'm not sure what you're asking there, Jacob. What part will term come to play? Oh, okay. What I think you're asking is, are the Penguins looking for their long-term coach, or would they go with a transitional guy? I think a transitional guy actually is possible. A guy who comes in for a couple or a few years, really to work with the young guys, knowing full well you're going to fire him in 3 years, to hire that coach to take them to the next level and win. Yeah, I think that's what you're asking. Gary Anderson, if you're Dubas and the Pens do wind up with picks 11 and 12, would you look into trade up into the top 5 to land one of the elite players, or would I prefer to add to very good prospects and stay put? Good question. I suppose it takes 2 to tango. I hadn't considered that before, Gary, and there's only a few players in this draft that I would count as kind of can't miss guys. You know, they say Schaefer's a can't miss defenseman. He might not be a 60-point, number 1 defenseman, but he's an NHLer. Is it Misa, who is now on some boards the number 1 guy? James Higgins, I would take a very strong look at. Outside those few guys, you could miss. And so is it worth giving up 11 and 12 so that you get into the 5th slot to select Anton Frondel? I would say no. But if let's just say some team really likes Frondel and Higgins is on the board there at 5 or 6, and you can jump up, then yeah, I probably would. I do very much like Roger McQueen. So for me, trading up, I would be listening to I'd have my ear to the ground to see what teams really liked McQueen. If any of the teams in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range are high on him, I wouldn't give up if they have 2 picks, and I don't think they're going to. But by the way, they can easily trade a first this year, their 11th pick this year, and a 2026 second rounder to jump up a few spots. That's certainly plausible, and make sure they at least get McQueen. I'm not sure why some of you are really jumping on the Jake O'Brien bandwagon. He's, he would be a nice consolation prize. I don't know that he's a potential number 1 center. Maybe a solid number 2. High-end number 3. McQueen is a top 6 center if that back is healthy. All right, let's I'm really behind on the questions, aren't I? I'm going to be here like 2 hours. By the way, as soon as I'm done with this, I'm hopping on the bike and getting lost. Let's see here. Oh, here's an interesting question, Steve. Does the coaching change the status of players like Poulin and Puustinen with the organization? No, I don't think so. Puustinen had a heck of a chance. I mean, look, it's not like Puustinen didn't play 60 NHL games. It's not like, the GM has no say in this matter. I understand why Penguins fans have these perceptions, because Steelers coaches for 50 years have kind of had the GM under their thumb. And you assume that's the same way in hockey. Mike Sullivan, powerful coach, has Ron Hextall or Jim Rutherford or Kyle Dubas under his thumb, and he dictates what's going to happen. No, that was never the way it worked. And I promise you that's not the way it worked with Hextall. I promise you that. I promise you that Mike Sullivan found out about the moves that Hextall made sometimes at the same time you and I did. Promise you that. Or minutes before. So would Poulin look, there's always the possibility that one of those two guys or both of them come into camp next year just full of piss and vinegar. Just, spitting nails, stronger, better, ready to attack the world. In which case, they might earn a lineup spot. But it wouldn't be because of a new coach. It would be because they earned it. All right. Let's see here. Let's go to that regular dude. The Beauvillier deal came as a result of very hot sellers market. Otherwise, he would have cost a fourth, maybe a third at most. Yeah, that's what I wrote. That was the price tag I had on him. Yeah, you might, maybe you get a third round pick out of him, and then that incredible sellers market. That was amazing. Let's see here. Keep in mind, if the Penguins get the 26 Rags pick, that'll give them 2 shots at Gavin McKenna in a much deeper draft. Unlikely, but theoretically possible. The Rangers aren't a lock to make the playoffs again with Sullivan. I'd prefer the Rags give the Penguins their 2026 first-round pick. Yes, that's what is almost certainly going to happen. From the Eriksson family, lives next door to the Von Trapps, I've heard. Am I coming to Sweden in November for the games against the Predators? I certainly plan to. I've been watching flight prices, and they're down to about $600. That's if you fly in the cargo area. For a 14-hour flight, I probably will upgrade my seat and spend some extra Delta miles and make sure I'm at least comfortable. I might even go a day early and stop in England, because that's where all the flights go into Heathrow and then up to Sweden. Maybe I'll drive around England for a day. If so, I'd love to buy you a cold one and pick your brain on everything. Penguins, appreciate your work. Keep it up. Eriksson family, you have a deal. Book me. JR, what is the likelihood that the first round pick this year is ready for the big leagues opening day 2025-26? There are a couple of guys who have a lower ceiling, higher floor. Brady Martin, the Sioux Greyhounds center, strikes me as that guy who could, in theory, play in the NHL next season. But he's not a top 6 center, right? He would be a third liner, maybe a fourth liner to ease him into it. To ask a rookie defenseman, that's a lot. Of course, Harrison Brunick almost pulled it off. Maybe the big Czech defenseman. I haven't seen enough of him to know. I mean, listen, you guys know how insanely busy I was this year. And I promise you, I wasn't sitting there on the airplane catching a 6 a.m. flight, watching prospect games and prospect videos. I was trying to sleep. This is why I leave prospect scouting to the prospects all season. Now, I happen to think I'm not bad at it. When I have time to sit down, I don't watch highlight videos. I try to pick a game or two and really watch how they perform shift after shift after shift. I look for the consistency. I look for energy. I look for opportunities. Did they seize an opportunity here? Were they gliding? Were they coasting? Were they playing juniors hockey? Were they scoring junior hockey goals? Were they unleash a wrist shot from 40 feet and get a goal and kind of pound their chest? Those are the things I look for. Do they finish their checks? All of the little things. Do they loop? Do they stop and start? I'll have to do that with a couple of guys probably later this month. I'll pick a couple of games. McQueen doesn't have a lot of tape. I'll pick some from Jake O'Brien and Brantford and the Czech defenseman, maybe one other, and really sit down and go through them. Let's go to Ryan. Got a new commenter. Ryan, hola. Do I think or know if Dubas is on the phone to Tampa for Isaac Howard? Listen, we have to assume, right? That's right up Dubas's alley. Bo Smith says, what about Will Cooley? He's on my RFA list. Yeah. I think some teams would overpay him if they see the Rangers unable to sign him. But, yeah, I think he would only cost a second-round pick. I would take that, Bo, in a heartbeat. I would happily sign Cooley to, let's say, a 5-year, $20 million deal and give up a second-round pick. Yep, done. I don't know where Dubas is at on a player like that, though. You might want to try to trade for him instead. Although, I don't like the idea of helping the Rangers by trading with them. That's for sure. So I think, you own their draft pick. You don't want to help them out. Do I think Dubas could snag Nick Hague from Vegas? I like the Hager bomb. I don't know if he is the type of Penguins defenseman that they need. He can get caught in the wallpaper sometimes. Bruce Cassidy has a very defensive-friendly system. I don't mean defenseman, I mean defensive-friendly system. I don't know outside that system how good Hague is. I don't know. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm not saying he's good. That would be a question for some professional scouts who have sat down and really watched. Possible? Yes. Again, I also think Hague is close to that $5 million line, according to AFP, as I recall, which makes it even less likely. Let's go to Joe Saki. Based on my NYR pick analysis, should Dubas trade that 26 since you predict it will be a much later pick? I think it would be in play for the right person, right? Brandon says, respectfully, I don't think there's too much of a difference between Laviolette and Sullivan. The Rangers' core is rotten, and they are facing league parity as the Penguins are. They're a bottom 16 team. Oh, there's a huge difference between Laviolette, who has a 3-year shelf life. Look at Laviolette. There's always that spike. He comes in. He has a certain forecheck system. Everybody jumps on board, and then by the 3rd year, he's done everywhere. He's, pretty much everywhere he's gone. And yeah, I how do I say this? The Penguins had pretty good success against the Rangers until the last couple of seasons because Mike Sullivan would absolutely pick apart Peter Laviolette. Pick him apart. They had success against Laviolette's Nashville Predators and every other team he's coached because Sullivan would just and that forecheck system would be toast. All right, Guinness for strength. Yeah, get some beer muscles. Is that what you're saying? At number 11, Guinness for strength says, would you prioritize a center or D-man as their biggest need? Whatever, the better player. You can't in the NHL very often try to draft for position because it's such a crapshoot. You're taking 18-year-olds. You're not sure how they're going to develop. You can't pass up a better player in exchange for, a need. And since both are needs, if it came down to it, let's just say the two players were equal. I would go with a center because the Penguins have none. Tristan Brose being the only, guy who could fill an NHL center's role that they've got right now. Really the only one. Whereas you look at young defensemen, Pickering and Brunick, and you can get by with some of these other mid-20s guys like Connor Timmins and P.O. Joseph, in transition as you go find others. I'm also a big fan of signing and trading for defensemen. Spend the premium, get it done, because defensemen so often fail. They're so hard to develop. Find one that's already developed. Minnesota doesn't have a first-round pick this year. The plot thickens. Dun, dun, dun. All right, let's go back to Flux here. Oh, here's, I'm going to put this on the screen for y'all. Flux says, appreciate the shout out. There's his YouTube channel. I probably should just call Matt. I've seen him on Twitter. I should call Matt and offer him a job, actually. Someone gave me $2. I appreciate you. Or did you? Or is that just the name? I'm not sure. Butthole asks, really, you couldn't pick a better name for me to put on the screen. Trade Bo Byram for our first, maybe some other pieces. Man, you guys are really high on Bo Byram, aren't you? Like, you're just like, a lot of you are just chomping at the bit, trying to find ways to go get him. I mean, really? Is that the hill you guys want to die on? Is Bo Byram? I don't know. 11th overall pick for him seems like quite a haul for Buffalo. Quite a lot. So I would say no. That's my 2 cents. I appreciate you. All right, some love for Flux in the messages here. How many questions am I behind? Oh, not many. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up here then. Got like 5 more questions. Here we go. Rapid fire, the lightning round. John Powell says, how much turnover do I see with the roster now that Sullivan is gone? That's like, hey, is Achari and possibly Jari moved out? Great show, Dan. Great Pens coverage as always. Keep it up. Appreciate you, John. You don't have to compliment me, by the way, to get me to read your question. I do see veterans being moved out. I do not see Jari being moved out. Kyle Dubas wants a 4 or 5 man battle royal next September and October. That's just what he wants. He wants to throw the net in the middle of those 5 guys and let them fight it out, although in reality it's probably 4 because Philip Larson isn't as good as Murashov. And, yeah, I don't know. I think Murashov is already better than Yoel Blomqvist. But Murashov could use a bit more seasoning in the AHL. A bit more. I think you will see Sergei Murashov in the NHL next December, January. That's my timeline on him. I thought he acquitted himself well in the AHL playoffs. There was only one goal that I was like, ooh, okay. You might have had that one. Otherwise, it was just some really awful defending by the veteran, awful defending by the Wilkes-Barre Scranton veteran defenseman. It wasn't the kids. It wasn't Harry Brunick and Owen Pickering who made mistakes. It was Philip Krall and the older guys who just got torched by the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. I mean, it was bad. If you read my PHN Plus coverage of the Wilkes-Barre games and the prospects coverage there a few weeks ago, I didn't pull any punches. It was as bad as I've ever seen. Matt Horvath, Dan, do you think it's right to not really be going for it while we still have Crosby? I think I agree with Sullivan. If it's true, he thought we should be going for it now. Yeah, I think what Elliot Friedman is saying, which really kind of dovetails more to what Adam Crowley reported the morning that Sullivan was fired. I think Crowley used the wrong words, or maybe his source used the wrong words. That Sullivan didn't have any demands, no. But I do think there was a disagreement between Sullivan and Dubas, which, by the way, I think this because Dubas forecasted a disagreement between those two last June. Dubas said there would be a disagreement. He flat out said it. That was at the draft in Vegas. So I have no doubts it actually came to fruition where Sullivan's like, okay, if you patch these holes, I can win or get pretty close to it. And Dubas is like, yeah, I'm thinking I don't want to patch those holes with veterans. I'm going to try for some young players or leave them exposed. And Sullivan's like, are you serious? This is what I think. No one's told me this. This is how I foresee it. Sullivan's like, well, then I don't want to coach that kind of team. And Dubas is like, I would agree. You shouldn't coach that kind of team either. And away they went. But Sullivan didn't necessarily think they should go for it now. To try to win now, Matt, would be a futile effort. The Penguins are just so far away. They would need 3 defensemen. They would need to add a couple of wingers, a third-line center. Well, maybe not a couple of wingers. Certainly, maybe one third-line winger who can score, a third-line center, and 3 defensemen. And quite frankly, they probably have to look for an upgrade in goal if they wanted to win now and be assured or be confident. Maybe Tristan Jarry is the guy he wants to be next season. I think it's possible, by the way. But yeah, the Penguins are that far away, and you can't try to build around a 38-year-old guy. The cost to acquire those pieces would strip you of the players you want to see, the McGroartys, the Koivunens, the Pickerings, the Brunicks, these first-round picks they've got. All that is gone if they try to win now because you're going to have to spend it. Let's see, heavy hitter with a Flyers jersey in his profile photo. This ought to be good. Dan, do I think the Pens will be interested in Cam York or take a chance on Risto? Great question. I actually have an article, or the article I wrote today about the trades. It was going to be much longer because I had a second section of defensemen, and I had Cam York on my list, heavy hitter. I like Cam York. I liked Morgan Frost. I liked those prospects. I guess those were the Hextall prospects that the Flyers just couldn't seem to develop, or they couldn't take the next step in their development, or what have you. I liked a lot of those guys. And so, I could see the Penguins taking a chance on Cam York, not on Ristolainen. I mean, don't forget, hitter, that Danny Briere wanted a pretty good haul in exchange for Ristolainen. The Penguins aren't giving up young players, good draft picks for, how old is Risto now? 30, 31? Not happening, yeah, on that front. Good question, though. Matt comes back. Let's see here. The Crosby line, after the Four Nations break, we would have been in the playoffs with some goaltending and defense if we addressed that and added a winger and added a center. Don't forget, I mean, after the Four Nations, the Penguins, I think, had a winning record. It was January, it was actually October, January, and February that absolutely sunk the Penguins' season. It took all of their might to get back into the race at the end of December. And then they had that holiday break, and they came back from the break, and they just sucked. They sucked out loud, to quote the old comic Lisa Lampanelli. Old because I think she's retired now, doing other like charities and animal rights things and that sort of thing. Yeah, it was January and February. And after the break, they had goaltending. But I do agree. I mean, look, Crosby put forth a playoff-worthy performance. It was the other 16 guys who came up short. Well, not 16. Let's put Rust and Raquel. So of a 22-man roster minus 6, that's 16. Let's call it another 12 guys who didn't live up to what was required from them. Let's see here. Heavy Hitter says, please take Torts as head coach. Hey, listen, I advocated for John Tortorella back in 2015 before the Penguins hired Mike Sullivan, before the Penguins even hired Mike Johnston. I was like, Torts is the guy. And the Penguins blogosphere just took me behind the woodshed. And they couldn't believe it. And then they realized how good Torts was. And they're like, oh, I mean, none of them ever came back and said Kingerski was right. I wouldn't expect that. But I think Torts has probably... I think Torts' coaching career is probably over, unless he's just like an interim guy with a veteran team. Because I don't think a coach would entrust Torts with his young players right now. I just don't. The way he kind of treated Morgan Frost, the toilet seat joke, funny, very quotable. If I'm Morgan Frost, I'm like, dude, I maybe have a few more words, which I suppose did happen eventually. Tank for McGavin, a 26 draft. Matt says, thanks, Dan. Hey, listen, you guys don't need to compliment me, but I certainly do appreciate it. Someday I'll tell the stories of how some people in Pittsburgh tried to keep us down and not let us happen, tried to have us, removed and all sorts of things. I've been through it all, man. And somehow we are still here. Big Joe is so confused watching the lottery selection show. Got on X and everyone else was as well. Now, yeah, they didn't do a very good job of explaining. They should have explained it a couple or a few times, that they were not just drawing logos as they've done in past years, but to really make it, above board. There was like each team had like 3 numbers and poop, poop, poop. And they, I wasn't lost. I knew that fact that they were drawing numbers and the team had like 3 numbers assigned to it, and you had to have all 3 numbers. I don't know if they'll do that again, but we'll see. I think we should trade glasses, Dan. You don't like these glasses? All right. I appreciate you. All right, Erickson family, I guess you are in Sweden, so I'm excited about Philip Hollander next season. A much more complete player this time around. should be a solid addition to the top 9 next season. My take, I haven't seen him in person, and so that's tough for me. What I did see, infinitely better skater was Philip Hollander. Here's my question. Is he a center, as he was, or is he now a winger? And I can't quite get an answer to that. All right, kids, I did an hour 20. That motorcycle is calling my name. I'm going to check the weather forecast and get the hell out of here. I appreciate you all. We'll do another one next week. As long as you keep showing up, I will keep doing them. So, all right, that's it. Cheers and have fun.